Oh, Dawn, thank you for being who you are. What a gift. Uh, what a gift for all of us to hear and describe what we do in the language of calling and not a job description. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to share a little bit about my current expression of call. And I say current expression because, as we've heard from others, the expression of calling changes, yet at heart, it remains the same. I'm reminded of this poem by William Stafford called The Way It Is. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder what you're pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it's hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. So, in preparation for this, I wanted to follow the threads of my call, and that was a real gift. So, thank you for this invitation. And it wasn't lost on me the paradox of this request because part of my calling is to help others discern what their calling is and to examine their threads and recognize God at work. Uh, and when I get asked by folks, I don't know what God wants me to do, I don't know what my calling is, I often ask them, if you were plopped down on an island, what could you not help yourself from doing? And so I asked myself the same question. And I think I would find myself in a conversation with any person on that island about their spiritual journey. I'd want to know how they've seen God at work in their life and how they connect to the divine. And so that's the starting knot on my thread of a calling, a curiosity be about our connection to the divine and the spiritual journey. And from there, I had that led me to a deep desire to equip people for ministry. And that has taken many forms: small groups, conversation, preaching, teaching, spiritual practices. Another description of this is spiritual formation. And this is what I know to be true. People have callings that flow from their spirit, from their connection to the divine. And this calling animates their gifts, multiplies their offerings into the world, into serving the great mission, which is God's dream for the world, where there is justice and love, and all are revered and are seen as sacred. So along the way, following my thread, I found myself in organizations, go figure, churches or a Fortune 500 corporation. And I recognize that while people have callings, so do organizations. The language is a little different. It's called mission and culture, but there's an organizational spirituality that needs to be tended to as well. And in large corporate settings, because I was driven to have conversations about spirituality, I noticed how people's spirits could take a hit in this context, how if their spirit wasn't grounded in a calling or serving something greater, that it would sap them and devour them sometimes. And I also noticed, and at that time for me, that being the primary, that churches being the primary place to go to for that time was where people went to get fed spiritually. And the churches were sort of missing the boat in terms of being relevant for people out in the real world. Now, I know this sounds harsh, but I was young, and this is really a key seed, though, to my calling and what led me into ordained ministry. So, recognizing this, I felt called to help churches and the people in them to be better aligned, to be better at not only equipping disciples for ministry, but attracting the spiritually hungry and giving them good, nutritious spiritual food. So this thread has continued to lead me to a few places, starting with alternative expressions of church, looking what that means, looking to people on the margins, fostering places where Christian community is lived. It's not just a concept, where grounding our lives in spiritual practices invite the inward and the outward journey that move into action to change the world. I've continued to follow that thread, and it landed me in a large corporate ministry setting called Catholic Healthcare, very broadly speaking, a large ministry that is devoted to serving the most poor and vulnerable and following the healing ministry of Jesus and recognizing that everyone is sacred and that we're all expressions of God's healing love. That really resonated with me. So it's in this setting that I get to do the following. I get to help employees connect their calling and offer it in service in the context of a ministry of the greater good. I get to help this organization stay focused and faithful to its calling, its mission and purpose. And I do this by playing in this amazing space, this intersection between individual calling and organizational mission, where that's where great things can happen when that's aligned. I get to help individuals explore questions like, am I faithful to who God is calling me to be? How am I called to offer my gifts? And I get to journey with leaders who lead this organization with an intention to being guided by their inner life instead of their outer life, so that the spirit can flow through them and they can set a tone. I get to ask organizations, are you faithful to who God intends you to be? Are you partnering and helping God's dream to be realized? Justice and love and dignity and joy and serving the common good? And are the people who are here serving you now, um, and what you say you're doing, are we all in alignment so that we can be this powerful light in the world? So I'm privileged to serve with executive leaders and amazing caregivers, nurses, and doctors, and critical care support people like dietary workers and environmental service workers and chaplains and social workers, and the list goes on. And I get to walk with them and journey with them. And I do have the gift of encouragement, Dawn, so I get to encourage them and stoke and pay attention to when they stumble and remind them who they are and call forth who they know they are to be, and watch for burnout and watch for things that get in the way of them bringing their full self to work. So what's happened during the pandemic? Well, in short, working in healthcare, um, challenging, no doubt, right? And so I get to encourage our caregivers as we all struggle through the fear of the disease when it first came, and their concern about how will this affect my family, and yet they showed up to care for people in this crazy time. Think way back to a year ago when we didn't know what this was all about. Been in the journey and the meetings with people as we managed PPE and other shortages, and figuring out with really smart people, how do we get this work? How do we get things in people's hands and on their bodies so that we can go in? And we discerned hard policies like, oh, no visitors because we want to keep the public safe, but we know there's a dignity in those who are sick and dying and they need their loved ones. So how do we find those bridges, and how do we work with that? And now we're managing vaccines. We manage testing and we set up testing sites, and now we're managing the vaccines. And through it all, boy, my heart is filled because I get to see how people's calling is showing up and allowing them to be resilient and show up in these challenges. It's their calling. It's that deep well of knowing this is where God has placed me for this time in this moment, and I show up. And so I'm in awe and wonder at where this thread has taken me. I'm deeply grateful for God's faithfulness and presence at each step and at every dot. Um, and I am mindful of two things from Rilke, uh, the invitation to live the questions. And boy, I continue to live in this question of calling. You can just ask Pastor Kathy. And the question that Mary Oliver invites us to sit with, which is, What will you do with this one precious life? And in those questions and in sitting with that, trusting that God is holding us and giving us light and spirit and prompts and love and grace when we fall and stumble and resiliency. So I hope that in sharing some of my threads, um, my hope is that you might recognize some of your own threads that have been woven and where you've been called and where your calling has taken you on the amazing journey of your precious life.